moving from an employee of a business that you own to actually being a business owner really has a lot to do with, can the job be executed without key person dependency or without the business owner? Complexity will happen automatically. So you always want to start with simple. Simple is actually more scalable. It's not a very sexy topic for many business owners. They're thinking about, how do I get more leads? How do I get more customers? What's the latest and greatest marketing approach? And that's infinitely more interesting than, how do I document a step-by-step process for the way that I'm entering a lead into a CRM. As far as like AI, 2 or 3 things are going to happen, and you want to just obviously skate where the puck is going, not where it is. So
one of the hardest things to do as a business owner is to be able to take yourself from the day-to-day operations so that you can get working on your business and spending more time on the things that you'd rather be doing. Now, my next guest is Dave Jenyns. He is the founder of a SaaS company called SystemHub and also the author of a book called Systemology, where he helps businesses free up time, create some space so that they can run profitable and scalable operations. Now, my business has benefited a lot from Dave's work in terms of getting the practical knowledge that he has and being able to implement it into systems and processes and procedures so that our team can continue to grow without me having to be there. And in this conversation, I got some really good knowledge on how to get processes in place, why it's so important, and also some of the pitfalls that business owners fall into where they get their business to a point where it's either over-systemized or not systemized enough that they get stuck doing the day-to-day processes. But one of the key elements that I learned a lot from Dave is the way that he has a process for creating processes. He's got a great eye for detail, and in this conversation, he got to share the reasons why he started his own SaaS company in the first place and what it took to launch and grow it to where it is right now. He also goes through the trouble that small businesses have in order to be able to scale their operations and also make it a more profitable experience. So without further ado, let's get into the conversation. This is the Entrepreneur Unplugged. I know Systemology is your main business, SystemHub, Systemology, but you were doing digital marketing beforehand, right?
Yes.
What was that?
Yeah.
Well, was that your first business in the online space, or what was it before?
Yeah, look, I'd done a few things in the online space, but they were more little promotions as opposed to businesses. So I did sell the MCG through a marketing idea, and I had a website and I was selling e-commerce for that, but there's no real back end to that, no ongoing work. So I wouldn't necessarily class that as a business. It felt more like a promotion. And then there were website builders that I was affiliates for. So I was playing the affiliate game for a little while there, kind of like a buy with bonus type strategy where I was marketing different programs using my affiliate link and bundling in some extra goodies. And then we had the rock and roll clothing music store, which was Planet 13, and we had an e-commerce business built off the back of that. And then the digital agency, which is probably where I really got quite strong in my marketing through that business.
And then from that business, how did Systemology come about? Was it like a pivot, a transition, a point in time where you thought this is, building systems or helping businesses with businesses is the better pathway to go? Or
I always had a soft spot for systems and processes, and we were creating our own and just saving them as Google Docs, and we were using it internally for the digital agency. And then at the time, because this is probably going back 5 or 6 years ago, the competition level in that space wasn't nearly as high as it is today. And making SaaS platforms are getting easier and easier with some of the AI solutions coming out and no coding apps and all these sorts of things. Yeah. But at the time, the holy grail everybody used to always talk about was a SaaS, because if you could get a software as a service that was billing clients on a monthly basis and it was something that was useful and important and part of their day-to-day business, that made it harder to turn off. So it was quite attractive at the time, and I thought I can create this platform that will help to scratch our own itch. So even if it bombs and it was a terrible failure from selling it perspective to clients, there'd still be some upside for us creating it internally. And that's where I started with System Hub, and then started that, I suppose, for a good number of years before even Systemology became a thing, because Systemology was really, the way I think about it almost is the way that Robert Kiyosaki wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad to sell his board game. He came out with the board game first, Cash Flow, and then wrote the book to sell it. And I almost feel like Systemology, to a certain extent, was used to sell the idea of System Hub and just the concept of building systems and processes for small business. And Systemology, I was kind of kept on coming back to, oh, it's not really the software. The software isn't the magic here. Anybody could have any piece of software and they're quite interchangeable. So where is the magic? And then I thought Systemology was a way to kind of really capture the 11 herbs and secret spices for the way that we think about systemization.
Yeah, nice. Because just for listeners for context. So you've got System Hub, which is the SaaS product, and then there's Systemology, and then there's Systemology, which is the book, which I actually have, which I do have here. And
really good.
And I want to bring this up because you were nice enough to give me one of these copies, and it's one of the few books that I found really practical, as in you read it, and with most books, you gather the information and it's like, oh, okay, cool, great, and I've got all this knowledge. But it was actually one of the few books that I read and thought, I'm going to take that and then implement it. Like each chapter was like that. Had you always built your business off the back of systemizing with the view to get yourself out of certain things in the business? Like what's the thought process behind that? Because just where that question is coming from, I know a lot of online businesses, they start a business to make money, and then that's kind of where they get stuck. They make money and they have to keep working in the business to keep making money. So what's your thought on that as far as systems is concerned?
I've definitely always had systems in my DNA. My dad was a systems engineer, and he created systems for my brother and I to gamify our lives and make sure that we were doing the things that he wanted us to around the house, and that's how we earned pocket money and things like that. Yeah. And so it was kind of baked in from a young age, and then I've been involved with a few businesses where systemization was an important component of it. So the Rock and Roll Clothing Music Store, we had the intention of franchising it and growing it that way. Now, manuals are an integral part of franchising, so it was kind of baked into that system or that business. And then similarly, for a while there, I was doing some stuff in the stock market education space, and that was all about designing a trading system. When do you get in? When do you get out? What is your position sizing? Which it is a system as well. And again, I've always defaulted to thinking in terms of getting systems and process in place. And the more that I've done it, I don't know if I just fell into it at a younger age, but the more that I've done it, the more that I've realized that is where the game is when it comes to business. And moving from an employee of a business that you own to actually being a business owner really has a lot to do with, can the job be executed without key person dependency or without the business owner? And there's really no other way to pass the knowledge that you have or that your key team members have than getting it documented and getting it down. That's kind of how you move from this tribal knowledge that we just kind of know and gets passed down from generation to generation to something that then is codified and written, and this is how we do things here. It's much clearer to improve upon and pass down. So it's the more I've done it, I've just become more and more in love with it, because I almost feel like it's the building block of business. And whether you're going to sell, whether you're going to scale, whether you're going to just continuing to run your business day to day, systems help and touch all aspects of that.
Yeah, I think you've got a good point there as well. With just what I've heard with the three things, right? So if you're going to continue to run your business, if you're going to scale, or I think as it gets further down the line, have a saleable business. Uh, those three different stages. How much does it change? Like, how much do your systems have to evolve, or your business model has to evolve as you get through that? So, from a solopreneur to,
Yeah.
again, scaling the business to then, have it so that it is an attractive package for maybe an investor or somebody to come along and buy it, which doesn't happen very often in the coaching space. How important is it, or how does the systems evolve through those stages? Does it?
Yes. Look, I think the biggest challenge that small business faces is consistency, and they really struggle to be able to do tasks on a consistent basis without that key person dependency. So, whenever you first get started, complexity will happen automatically. So, you always want to start with simple. Simple is actually more scalable, less moving parts. And there's a tendency when you're just starting out to overcomplicate because you understand the thing intimately. You're customizing solutions for every client that comes through, and it's easy then to kind of get caught up in it because of the complexity.
Yeah.
So I think starting simple, because the complexity will happen over time naturally, that will make you more scalable, and being ruthless in thinking what are the essential elements? How does the business make money? And what are the key elements for that to happen? And really look to improve those steps. Because, I mean, if you hire great staff, they will fill in the gaps for parts of the business where things need to happen. But you just need to focus on what are the most important parts that you need to happen a certain way. And then the gaps can be filled by great team members. So as far as like how do they change and evolve, look, I think probably the body of systems and processes grows as you grow in business. You get extra team members, and you've got different departments, and you've got department heads and the team members that work in those departments, and then you've got potentially a management layer. So there's a whole range of different systems and things that can get introduced. So they will just continue to grow as you grow. It's what's strange, or I find interesting, is it seems to be at no matter the level of company or the size, there's only a handful that really nail the systems component. Like it's more the exception than the rule.
Yes.
Even for very large companies can be very disorganized, or they go off track. I remember doing some work with 7-Eleven, and I was sitting at this conference and having a discussion, and it's a food convenience store. For those outside of Australia, I don't know if it's global or not, but they are everywhere on every street corner, and they have a lot of systems for everything. But they've gone the other way. They've completely over-systemized to the point where new team members come on board, and then they just don't know where to start because there's just so much. So at each different stage, there are different challenges with systems culture. I think there are certain companies that have managed to get clear on who their target audience is, the problem to which they solve, the staff members that they need to solve those problems, and then have evolved the system to optimize for that scenario. And McDonald's is a great example of that. They've really optimized to that scenario. But every business is a little bit different, and you can't follow the exact path because your target audience, your problem, and your customers are going to be different. So there's elements that need to be taken on board and evolved at each stage.
Yeah, that's right. And I think with what you said before as well about team members coming in and improving systems or filling in the gaps. I was talking to somebody the other day actually about, what processes they've got before they hire somebody, and they were trying to have everything ready for that person, like everything ready for that person. What do you think is a point where you go, okay, I've got enough to bring somebody on and have them make it their own? Like, is there a point in time
Yeah.
where you go, I've got enough to have somebody
Yeah.
come on,
Definitely think momentum and moving forward and figuring it out on the fly and as you go is the best way to go. Trying to wait until the perfect time of having everything documented to a certain level just becomes a hurdle for getting down to doing what you know you should be doing.
Yeah.
Because even if you don't have documentation in place, maybe the first level is you bring that team member on when you've got undercooked documentation and you have some level of training with them where you meet them on Zoom or in person and you just record what it is that you teach them. And that
Mm.
it's almost like you force the positive constraint of the fact that you have to have something together because you're going to meet with them next Monday. And now you're forced to think, well, I need an outline of what I'm going to say in the very first meeting that a new sales team member joins with us. Okay, well, that now becomes version number 1. So I think having these positive constraints that get you to act and get something down, and every time after that you just keep iterating on it, that's probably the real key.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's some key takeaways there, because you can document as you also go, right? That if you've got a framework, then that's a good starting point. For people who have reached a certain level in their business where it's no longer just a startup or a hobby. They're making maybe 10, 15, 20K a month consistently. You outline it really well in the book, but what are the key departments do you think that they need to have systems for, whether it's finance, sales, marketing, all of those things?
Yes.
Is there one that is more important than the other, in your opinion?
In business, you are only as strong as your weakest link because it's like the human body. And if the skeletal system has issues, no matter how strong the cardiovascular system is, you're still going to have problems. So while it's important to lean in on your strengths, and as an individual, that's what you should do, that doesn't mean you can neglect the other areas. What that means is you actually should find someone who can help to fill in those gaps. But I mean, if you're just new and you're starting out and it's you and a handful of people, you got to get business, you got to sell business, and you got to deliver. So that's marketing, sales, and operations. The reason that's important is because that then creates cash flow, and then you can solve most of the other problems with cash flow.
Yes.
Because now money is coming into the business and you can hire a bookkeeper who can help out with the finance, or you can hire someone to help out with the HR or some of the other areas. So if you went down to the smallest possible piece, the business has to make money. So what is essential for the business to make money?
Yeah, for sure. Marketing and sales, right? I was part of an organization where they over-systemized, well, maybe not over-systemized, but they spent a lot of time systemizing the back end, that there was nothing to feed it at one stage. Kind of the business sort of fell to the side. What do you think then, let's say as a solo, operator, and they're doing quite well, but they become the bottleneck, right? They're the people who stop the growth because they run out of time.
Yeah.
What's the level of support that you think they can do with, like, earlier, sooner rather than later? Because sometimes I know some business, they hire a little bit too late.
Yeah, definitely think when you're solo, the aim of the game is how do you get the lowest value tasks that are essential off your plate. So I feel one of the first hires you need is some sort of administrative assistant who can take the low value tasks that are essential to delivering that core product or service and get them off your plate. So that would be you need to consistently be running your marketing, and that means thinking about who your target audience is, building lists of those people and connecting with the right people to get your message in front of them. And that should be happening all the time. Whereas when you're solo, oftentimes a solo person, once they get a client, they get busy and then they forget about marketing until they've finished delivering for that client, and then they want the next client and they have to go hunting, but it's too late for marketing because marketing takes time. So I think tasks like marketing and having sales and marketing, even if it's just basic stuff, it's not even necessarily hopping on and having the sales calls, but connecting with the right people, sending out some engaging messages, having some stuff post on social media so that you're front of mind and then warm. So by the time you might need a client next, you've got a pool that you can dip into. So I feel that is definitely something. And then similarly, probably the administrative assistant can help with that piece, and then also with operations. There's going to be pieces around the delivery of your core product or service that are essential that you, maybe as the freelance or the solo person, is not adding much value to.
Yeah.
Booking calendar appointments, collecting, forms from clients and preloading them into CRMs, and setting up basic folder structure, infrastructure, and naming conventions. And there's a whole range of things like that just need to be done, but don't need any thought other than just following a particular process. So I feel, that's really where a solo person would want to start first.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's some good takeaways there because, sometimes they try to work out how much something costs, like a new staff member costs, when they're really an investment to make you more at the end of the day. So I think, that's something to think about for most people who are at the point where they want to scale or they want to grow and they need that support. So I was just thinking about your System Hub SaaS program. How did you start that thing? Like how, what sort of people did you get involved? Because I know, like you were saying before, there's more now. There's more SaaS products that's coming out. It's easier. There's more AI that can sort of support that level. When you first started it, what was it like?
I'm not a technical founder, so I realized that I'm going to need to get someone. I first thought, who in my world do I know that might at least be able to help me to create a brief? And I tapped them first. We created a solid brief and then started talking to some development teams. Looked around some different countries, settled on Eastern Europe because you can get good bang for your buck. They're very well-trained university education, some great coders and graphic designers come out of that space in the world. And so, found a group. And then I tested a couple just beforehand. Like I tried going down the route of working with a freelancer on some freelancer type websites and a few misstarts. And then I found the right partner. And we've been working together since day dot now. So a good 5 or 6 years they've been our partner in helping in that space. So that's kind of realizing where my strengths are, and I'm not overly technical, so I obviously needed to find someone who was.
Yeah. And when it came time to then launching it into the market and getting it out there, how did you do that? Like as far as, did you have some trial users and then redevelop the product or re-engineered it to then go out to the mass market?
We tapped into the Melbourne SEO, which was my digital agency at the time, and I introduced it to some of their clients as, hey, this is something that I'm working on. That was a great testing ground. I did really optimize and continue to think about the platform in terms of solving our own problems. So while we are a little bit client-led and we'll get feedback and things like that, I mean, I've got a really good filter for thinking, what are the primary objectives here? What are we looking to solve? For whom are we looking to solve it, which is ourselves, and we are the target client, and really thinking about how to do that in the simplest possible way and thinking about some of the outcomes. This is a business owner that's looking to scale and it needs to be simple and there's got a lot that's going on for them. They might want to exit at some point in time. So how do we make it easier for them to grow and scale and capture some of this knowledge without necessarily overcomplicating it, and something that builds enough value that potentially could be saleable on the other end. So they're just some considerations that I think about, and I while we do solicit feedback from clients and take some suggestions from them, I haven't gone too far down that path. Like I try and be self-led quite a lot by thinking, well, because then I make sure that there is a real use case and I'm not just putting a feature in because someone saw it was a cool feature and they thought that would be great. I'm kind of like, I don't want to have feature bloat in our platform. I want it to just be very thin
and useful as well. And I think a lot of businesses could do with that sort of mindset as well, like in terms of building, products that might suit them as well to solve a particular problem. I think that's a really good thing to have. So then you've got System Hub. How did the book come about? Like, I haven't really spoken to a lot of people who have written a book and put it out there and got, what you've been able to do. How did your book come about?
So the book really was a great way to solidify some thinking, as in we came out with System Hub. A lot of our clients want to systemise their business, and then they have a lot of questions that go beyond just the software. How do I do it? Where do I start? Who do I involve? What does a system look like? When should I be updating these systems and processes? So there's a range of different questions, and the book is a way to solidify my thinking around it and answer those questions. And it really felt like I was filling a space that is poorly addressed. And I think it's getting better, but there's not a huge amount of work that is tailored to small business around creating systems and processes. It's not a very sexy topic for many business owners. They're thinking about, how do I get more leads? How do I get more customers? What's the latest and greatest marketing approach? And that's infinitely more interesting than how do I document a step-by-step process for the way that I'm entering a lead into a CRM. I just needed to think about how could I change the conversation and how could I introduce some of my thinking on why I feel systems really is incredibly valuable for the business owner to master.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, at the start, the book itself is probably one of the most practical ones where you can like literally take the frameworks that you have and input it into your business pretty much straight away. How long did it take you to write this book?
The book took about 2 years. It was started off with some consulting, evolved into a mini program where I put a bunch of business owners through it, and then I ran a workshop, like a live workshop where I kind of distilled my thinking, and then that live workshop was transcribed, and then I worked with then I sent the transcriptions to a ghostwriter, and then the ghostwriter came back, and then I worked with it, and I pretty much rewrote it from scratch, but I found it infinitely easier to work with something rather than a blank page.
Yeah.
And then over time, moving some of the steps around, like the critical client flow, which is an important part of the process, didn't used to be step number one.
Yeah.
And optimize was actually earlier in the process, and scale was one of the last ones. So it just kind of moved around. The more clients I worked with, the more feedback I got, and really polished it up. I think I wanted to write a book that really stood the test of time and something that will be evergreen.
Yes.
So that was quite, if I'm going to go to the effort of writing it, I want to make sure that it remains useful for a long time.
For sure. I think it is very evergreen. This could be 10 years later and it'd still be very relevant. One of the things that I think that is unique, well, I say it's unique because normally sales marketing go first, but you've got client at the very, very top, right? That's kind of where the business or the systems, kind of stem down.
Yes.
And you said optimize was there before. How did client get up to the top?
I think the critical client flow, a lot of business owners had a lot of breakthroughs with it because it was a way to explain their business on one page without complexity, and should be done in a way that's easy enough that could be passed to any team member or anyone that's at arm's reach from the business, and they still get how the business works. And I think it's easy for business owners to add the complexity in and then say, oh, yes, if we do this, then that happens. But if the client asks for a green widget instead of a blue widget, then we do this. And if this happens, then that. And before they know it, it's one big mess around just a simple question. How does the business work?
Yeah.
What are you doing to get customers, sell customers, deliver the core product or service, and get them to come back? Like that was quite insightful. And also, as business owners do it, sometimes they get an aha moment because they start to realize why parts of the business aren't working.
Yeah.
Because they go, oh, we don't really have something in place for that, or that's not really documented, or that's always me who does that. So just going through that process right up front, I always got the best feedback from that. So I thought, well, you know what, I should probably open with that, because if systems and processes can be challenging for some business owners to get excited about, well, let's put the most exciting thing up front, and then hopefully the momentum can continue carrying them through the book. So it's a big part of trying to find good stories as well, to kind of keep pulling people in and through the story so they could get the lesson, but they got to go on the journey of the story, which was kind of, the fun bit that really kept them reading.
Yeah, for sure. And there's a lot of it in that book. Keen to get your thoughts on how AI is sort of going to play a role in this SaaS world, particularly the open AI, taking over the world for a period of time there. Where do you think, where do you see it? How does it affect you? Does it improve? Like, how do you use it?
I think as far as like AI, 2 or 3 things are going to happen, and you want to just obviously skate where the puck is going, not where it is. Yeah. So as far as what it's going to change, I think very clearly everybody's had the aha moment when they've typed something into chat GPT and gone, wow, look at that output. So I think the next step beyond that, and we're already starting to see asking these AIs to create programs or assistants that can do certain tasks. Yeah. Like first we're asking questions. We're not that far off being able to ask them not just questions, but to do things. And they'll have APIs that are connected to other services, and you'll be able to ask an assistant to do something, and it will go off and do it, and then come back and report that it's done. So I kind of feel like that's where we're going, and it's hard to really comprehend what's possible because there's so many eyes on this right now, and so many smart minds, and so many different platforms that are popping up every single day. There's probably hundreds of different new AI platforms that are popping up that are thinking of different spins and different use cases, and here's how we use AI in marketing, here's how we use it for in recruitment or HR, or here's how we're going to use AI in art and generating and video, and like there's just everywhere people are just bringing their own unique perspective and then layering it on top of this advancement in AI, and there's going to be some really interesting things that bubble off the back of that. As far as like how does it affect us, I think like documentation will continue to get commoditized, step-by-step procedures. So for us and Systemology, what I think about is I think, well, what can we do and what do we add value to over and above just creating a step-by-step procedure? Yes. And for us, a big part of that is building a systems culture. So for us, that's kind of the direction I'm pushing our systemologists in, really thinking about how do we enable them with the businesses that they work with to get the team on board and get these systems and processes to stick, because it'll get easier and we'll have these assistants that do everything. And I think like step-by-step processes really are the first step to training potentially one of these AI assistants.
True.
So I still think it's very valuable for businesses to continue to document their process, because whoever's executing on it, if it's AI, if it's human, if it's, local, or you've offshored it or whatever, at the heart of it, it just comes down to going, who are we serving? What is the problem we're trying to solve? What are the steps that we go to deliver that? Again, how do we grab someone's attention? How do we sell them? How do we onboard them? How do we deliver the core product or service? And how do we get them to come back? Like, that's still a flow regardless of who's doing it, human or robot, that needs to be clear enough. And it needs to be extra clear if you're programming in AI. Like, I think humans,
Still
sometimes
input,
we
right?
can fill in the gaps and make the jumps and do whatever, whereas you want to be very specific when it comes to robots. So
it's still
I
the
think
input
there's
that you need to
definitely
have into it, right? That's still the key. The commands, the prompts, and everything else. So, like for your then, for, like I said, your systemologists, people who are working with businesses to systemize, there's still a large element of the quality of what you put into it.
Yes, right? Yeah, for sure. And just getting the team to follow it. I mean, that's the other thing. It's one thing to have it. It's another to get the team to follow it. And you need to reach a point where the team just says, this is how we do it here.
Yeah.
There's a lot of resistance that happens up front for existing team members. And that's a challenge to get over. Once you get over that hump, though, then you think about all new team members that come on board.
Yeah.
And how do we indoctrinate those new team members from day one so that they don't know anything else other than this is just how we do things here? And that's really the place the business needs to get to for systems to work, because then, someone will very quickly opt out of that culture if they're not the right fit early on. They'll start work, maybe it's in the recruitment process, maybe it's within the first month or two, and they'll go, you know what, following process or the way that you do things, I don't really like it. It's not for me. They opt out.
Yeah.
And that's a win. Like, that's a win for everybody. Like, we just saved ourselves a lot of pain.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure.